Good afternoon, everyone. We're going to give everyone else a few more moments to continue to log in, and we'll start briefly.
I said 5 in the morning, I wake up to 5 for my eyes. Fear in my mind is a warning. Pray to the one you're relying. I've been wandering all day, tried to be fine, but I can't be. The noise in my mind wouldn't leave me. Tried to get by, but I'm burning. I'm behind, my mind it runs. All these thoughts I'm troubling. Fighting to give up my pain. Fighting to be on my lane. My mind running to the other side. When it's time to leave my life. When it tries to take me out. Tell you what I need. Right, yeah. I really need time. I need a free mind. I need my love. I need to free my mind down. I really need time. I need to free my love. I really need my love. Yeah. This is the peace that you cannot buy. Send me a love that you cannot mix. One is the joy that you cannot waste, and the other one price that you cannot fix. This is the peace that you cannot buy. Find it a way when you cannot see. Mind with this system you cannot break. I need to find release. But behind my mind it runs. All these thoughts are troubling. Fighting to give out my bed. Fighting to be on my lane. My mind running to the other side. When it's time to leave my life, then it tries to take me out. Tell you what I need. Right here, I really need my love. I need to free my love. I really need time. I need to free my mind down. I really need time. I need to free my love. I really need time now. Oh, yeah. Just let me free and in the open mind. Falling in the ice canal. Free and in the ocean now. Yeah. To set me free. Now I need to find relief. Set me to the open sky. Now I need to free my mind. Yeah. Boom, 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 boom. Boom, 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 boom. I might be falling deep. 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 Tell me now what you need. I've been going to God when I'm only my mind. I might be falling deep. Falling deep.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Brian Richards. I would like to welcome you to our afternoon session, Microaggressions in the Workplace with Tania Campbell. I will like to give a little summary of this week. So Black Mental Health Week is designed to support positive mental health of Black communities and individuals by providing alternative ways to support mental health and wellness. This year's event will work again to amplify the voices of Black communities and bring much needed awareness to the historical and current events of systematic anti-Black racism on mental health and wellness. The theme for Black Mental Health Week 2023 is Be You, Be Well. And our presenter today will be talking with us with that in mind. By the end of this session, there will be a short survey that would be entered into the chat. Please feel free to provide feedback to this session. This session is also recorded. Right, so right now I will be reading the land acknowledgement. We respectfully acknowledge the sacred land in which we gather today as the traditional territory of many indigenous nations. For thousands of years, this has been the land of the Haudenosaunee, Huron-Wendat, Anishinaabeg, Seneca, Chippewa, Inuit, Métis, and the current treaty holders, Mississauga of the Credit Peoples. We share responsibility with the caretakers of this land to ensure the dish is never empty and to restore relationships that are based on peace, friendship, and trust. We take this moment to openly reflect on the history of these lands that we now call home and commit to aligning with the struggles of our Indigenous neighbors and supporting their future. We are all treaty people. Many of us come here as settlers, immigrants, or newcomers in this generation or generations past. We acknowledge the 400-year history of communities of African descent in Canada who are not settlers, but who were forcibly displaced from their lands and brought to Turtle Island against their will as part of the transatlantic slave trade. We are indebted to our ancestors and recognize generations past. Today, we continue their work, fighting for our collective benefit, denouncing colonial histories, breaking down systematic barriers, improving the health and lives of our communities, and pushing back against anti-Black racism. We are committed to real and impactful changes for today and hope for future generations. Thank you. All right. So Tania Campbell is a social worker who has been in the field for more than 15 years. She worked at the Center for Addiction and Mental Health as a social worker and addiction therapist supporting an outpatient treatment program that focused on mental health and addictions. Currently, she provides support to Ontario physicians to help restore their overall health and wellness. She is a part-time instructor in the School of Community and Health Studies at Centennial College, and she has a private practice providing individual counseling and therapeutic support. Tania has been an adjunct lecturer at University of Toronto and has provided education and training to healthcare professionals and clients about mental health and addiction issues. As an experienced clinician, she has facilitated cognitive behavioral therapy group sessions and continues to provide education and training. Tania has a Master's of Social Work from York University and a Bachelor's of Social Work from Toronto Metropolitan University. She is registered with the Ontario College of Social Workers and Social Services, as well as the Ontario Association of Social Workers. Thank you so much, Tania, for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. I just want to make sure that you can all see my screen. Is that possible? Brian, can you see my screen?
Not as yet. Just have to.
Okay, well, while we get that sorted, I am Tania Campbell, and I'm very happy to be here and discuss with you a very important topic about microaggressions in the workplace. And this is something that we all may have experienced, and it is not something that is limited to just Black people. We all may have been providing or giving microaggressions to other people. But today's focus really is about microaggressions and how it impacts us. And I will focus on strategies to support you and give you some resources. So as I go through with this presentation today, I am not my brother's keeper or my sister's keeper. I am my brother and I am my sister. So I see myself in you, and I'm sure that you see yourself in me. So as we get started, I would like to provide an agenda, and then we will have a poll, 2 polls. So we'll just get that started. I've been running, and then I will start. Brian?
Okay. All right. So while we get that presentation started, just want to remind you to keep updated with all of our events that will happen throughout the week. on www.blackmentalhealthweek.ca. Also on our Instagram, same as our website, blackmentalhealth.ca.
Okay. I'm just going to shut off my camera for a moment.
All right. You can see your screen now.
You can see my screen now? Great. And you can see me?
Yes.
Wonderful. Okay. All right, so we'll get started. Microaggressions in the workplace. Again, welcome everyone. I can't see anyone. The only person I can see is Brian. So if I am talking and smiling, it really is all at Brian, but I'm sharing that all with you, my smile with you, and I'm talking to all of you. So today's agenda will be about what are microaggressions. So I'll talk about what that is. I'll give some definitions, the impact of microaggressions, how to address them, and we'll have a case discussion. I've got 2 case discussions today, but we may get through one, but if time permits, then we can go through both of them, and we'll go through them all together. And then there will be time at the end for questions. So first of all, I would like to start with a poll question. And I just would like to get a sense of people's familiarity with microaggressions. So we'll start with that, and then we'll go on to poll question number 2. I'll read it out. So how familiar are you with the term microaggressions and its meaning? A, not at all. B, somewhat. C, I have a pretty good idea of what it means, but I would like to know more. And D, I don't know what it means. E, I have never heard of microaggressions before. Okay, so we've got somewhat familiar. I have a pretty good idea of, okay. So most people are in the middle range. Okay, wonderful. Okay, so the next question, poll question. Hold on a second. Okay. Have you ever experienced microaggressions in the workplace? A, yes. B, no. C, I think so. And D, not sure, I don't know. Okay, yes. So most people have experienced microaggressions in the workplace. So you are in the right place. Whatever your answer was, you are in the right place. So I think it'll be great for us to just dive right in right now. And I will start off with a definition. I think that Mike will have to advance the slides for me. So I'm having some technical difficulties on my end with advancing. Can you go to the first slide? Okay. So apologies for that. So what you will hear is I will be saying, I'll be asking that the slides be advanced because I am not able to for some reason on my end. This is what happens with the virtual world, but we'll just get right into it. So microaggression is defined as a subtle but offensive comment or action directed at a member of a marginalized group, especially a racial minority, that is often unintentionally offensive or unconsciously reinforces a stereotype. For example, I don't see you as Black. So this comment, though may be meant as a compliment, is quite disrespectful, and the reason why is because the person may have a stereotype, I won't say will, but may have a stereotype of what Black people are like. And if this person doesn't fit the bill, then it's, well, I don't see you as what I think most Black people are like. Microaggressions are everyday, subtle, intentional, and oftentimes unintentional interactions or behaviors that communicate some sort of bias towards historically marginalized groups. So looking at the word micro in microaggression, you may think that it means that it's small, it's not something that's very significant, but the reason why it's micro is because the discriminatory behavior is very subtle, and in many instances, it's not easy to detect. So the impact, though, it's felt, it's significant, and it is just detrimental, especially if you're experiencing it on a regular basis or a daily basis. So microaggressions can happen anywhere to us. Doesn't mean just in the workplace, but for today's presentation, I'm speaking about specifically having these experiences in the workplace. So examples outside of the workplace may be, some people may be familiar with if you get onto an elevator and people move to one side, or someone's clutching their purse, or if you're being followed within the workplace. So those are a few examples that I think would be helpful to provide. And I just want to let you know that microaggressions oftentimes can be mistaken for discrimination, but the difference is the subtlety, and I really want to drive home that point. Microaggressions have been referred to as death by 1,000 cuts. There's also a bee sting analogy, and there's also a mosquito bite analogy. So death by 1,000 cuts would be, if you think about getting one paper cut, it hurts, it stings, but the pain goes away after some time. The bee sting analogy, the mosquito bite analogy would be very similar in the sense that if you get a sting or you get a bite, it hurts for a bit, a couple of days, then it goes away. But if you're being stung or bit multiple times, it is very harmful, and it can impact your physical, mental, and emotional well-being and your mental health. Next slide, please. Okay. So the term microaggressions has been termed by Dr. Chester M. Pierce. So he coined this term in 1970. He was a Black psychiatrist and a Harvard professor, and he described microaggressions as intentional as well as unintentional insults and dismissals that he regularly experienced or saw non-Black people inflicting on Black people. By the 21st century, the term was used to describe the degrading of any socially marginalized group on the basis of race, gender, sexual orientation, low status, and disability. And the term microaggression gained even more recognition by a psychology professor, Dr. Derald Sue Wing. So he expanded it to include all marginalized groups of individuals. So again, the accumulating, ongoing remarks, incidents does have a detrimental effect. It may seem small, and I know I'm repeating myself, but it may seem small, but over time, it's something that really does impact a person. And I think the biggest thing to really take into consideration is that you may second guess yourself. You may be thinking, well, was that racism? I'm not really sure what that was. I'm a little bit confused. And I can provide an example of myself. I've been in situations, work environments where I've experienced violence in terms of microaggressions, racism, and one of the reasons why I started looking into microaggressions is because of the experiences that I've had. And if I think about the history of my work, and even if I go back to my schooling and university, I experienced microaggressions as a student in my placement. I experienced microaggressions in my workplace where there are diverse individuals that I work with. I've been on a team where I'm the only person of color on my team, and have experienced microaggressions. And if you don't have a place to turn or someone to talk to, or just even say, this is something that happened to me and I'm not even really sure what it is. If you don't have a place to process that, what can happen is you can internalize it, and it can lead to isolation. And again, then you're may think negatively about yourself. So something that's really important to keep in mind, if you're feeling like something is going on, really just trust how you're feeling. And I do want to take a little bit of a step back to explain why further I thought it's really important to talk about microaggressions, because I think about my daughter. So I have an 11-year-old daughter, and I would never want her to be in a work environment where she's experiencing this and she's isolating and she doesn't have anyone to speak to. So me doing this is for me, it's for her, it's for you. And as I had mentioned earlier, I'm not my brother or my sister's keeper, but I am my brother and I am my sister. So here, this is an opportunity to get a better understanding of what it is, and then what can you do to help yourself to move forward and get the support that you need. So we can advance the slide. Okay. So I thought it was really important, it would be helpful to provide some definitions about microaggressions, put it alongside racism and discrimination, so you can get a better understanding of what the differences of these are. So racism is described or defined as a belief that humans can be divided into a hierarchy of power on the basis of their differences in race and ethnicity. Racism is frequently expressed through prejudice and discrimination. Discrimination is defined as the unjust or prejudicial treatment of different categories of people on the grounds of ethnicity, age, sex, or disability. So microaggressions, which I've just described, is about behaviors and action. So if we think about beliefs, racism would be all Black people are lazy. Discrimination would be, I'm not going to hire this person because they're Black. Microaggressions would be those subtle comments that I had mentioned earlier. So I don't see you as Black. I remember working at an organization where I was the only person of color on my team. And, it was a job that I was interested in. And I remember taking the GO train to work, and I was with a friend, and I said to her, I don't think that this is the place for me, and I might consider looking elsewhere. And she was really surprised, because she said, why would you want to leave? This is something that you wanted to do. And I couldn't put into words exactly what it was that I was experiencing, but I just knew that something was off. So as I had mentioned a little bit earlier, I was thinking like, I don't know, is this racism? But I don't think that it is, but it's just, it doesn't feel good. So the facts were, I was not properly onboarded, didn't get the proper training, but because I was an experienced clinician, I was expected to know the work very quickly. I found that I was held to a different standard. I was questioned often, scrutinized. In team meetings, I would be shamed publicly. And then sometimes I would get messages or people coming to me privately asking me if I'm okay. So these are some examples of microaggressions that one may experience. And these are the things that I'm talking about because I've had those real lived experiences. So we can advance the slide. So microaggressions affect many people, and we can also be microaggressors, but this is a list of some people that may experience microaggressions and be affected by it. This is not by any means a comprehensive list. And one thing that I do want to highlight is that Black women and members of the 2S LGBTQ plus community, as well as women with disabilities, are the individuals that experience the most amount of microaggressions within the workplace. So we'll get into a little bit more about microaggressions in Black women later on into the presentation, but I just wanted to give you an idea of some people who are strongly impacted. And this is part of the work that Dr. Dorald Wing Su has highlighted in terms of not just Black people that experience microaggressions. All right, next slide, please. So I'm going to spend quite a bit of time on this slide, impact of microaggressions, because I think that it's really, really important to discuss this. And what I can do as well is if anyone has a question, then we'll open it up at this time. So I'll go through a couple of these points in terms of the impact. So overall, one's overall health can be impacted in terms of physical health, mental health, emotional well-being, mental tax, which is you've got that strain and that pressure that's on you emotionally, just beaten down. So it does take a heavy toll on your overall physical well-being. I'm not going to say that microaggressions cause high blood pressure, but it can be something that comes about. If you've got high blood pressure, it can increase it. Sleep difficulties. So some people may experience insomnia, taking a long time to fall asleep, waking up many times at night, having nightmares. So these are some of the experiences that can be a result of repeated microaggressions within the workplace. Appetite issues such as loss of appetite. And on the other spectrum, it could be eating more than you usually do as a way to cope. Low mood, irritability, and low motivation, those are big. Those are things that can definitely happen. Depression, anxiety, negative feelings, stress I can't highlight anymore how these are things that can happen, particularly if you don't have a place to discuss what's going on for you. Some people may refer to substance use, alcohol, drinking alcohol, low emotional well-being, employee performance can be impacted. Problem-solving skills that may not have been an issue before, maybe something that you do start to experience. Your impede learning, difficulty concentrating, hypervigilance. And how I would describe hypervigilance in this type of setting is you're on high alert. It may be you're in a team meeting and you may anticipate having some sort of comment made towards you. You may be in the hall and passing or speaking with one of your colleagues, and then they make a snide remark, a snub, or say something that just is so inappropriate. So these are a couple of things that you may experience. And then with the hypervigilance, what can happen is then you then start to retreat. So it's, I'm not speaking anymore. I'm just not my usual self. The other thing that I want to talk about is workplace PTSD. And if I talk about it in its simplest terms, because when we think about PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, It may be that you've had a traumatic event, and microaggressions on a regular basis there's a report that says that depression is something that happens, trauma is something that happens, and with the PTSD, it may be that you're anticipating going into a meeting that something negative is going to happen to you. You may freeze. You may have a flashback of experiences that you've had in the past. So that's within the current work environment. If you leave your current work environment and go to another workplace PTSD can look like you're anticipating negative things happening to you, having experience of microaggressions, and just really, as I had mentioned before, you're on high alert. So I will stop there and take a sip of water because I have been speaking a lot. And if somebody has a question, then please do let me know. If not, I will continue on.
Hey, Tania. So we do have a few questions in the chat. So the first question, more directed to myself, will the Black mental health sessions be available to view if someone's not able to attend? So most sessions will be available on the Black mental health website, unless there's a session that is too sensitive to be on there. So most sessions will be. Tania, would you mind if the session is on the website?
I don't mind.
All right, sounds good. So this session will be available on the website. The next question in the chat is, how is it advantageous for us to refer to racism in the workplace as microaggression? It does not make sense to minimize the Black experience out the gate by referring to it as micro.
Yeah, so good question. So with microaggressions, it isn't saying that it is something that is insignificant or it isn't important. It's really the subtle nature of it. Oftentimes it is subtle. So the example of I don't see you as Black, I will actually get into more sub definitions of microaggressions, but it's really about the subtleties that make it that much more difficult to identify. The other thing too is if you are experiencing it and you're not really sure, and then you mention it to your manager, or it's something that you complain about, it may seem like you're being overly sensitive. So it's not something that is really clear as, or clearly defined as racism, where it's like, I think that you are this because you are Black, or discrimination where it's like, I'm not hiring you because you're Black. So that's why I wanted to highlight the micro does not mean that it is not important. It's macro. The impacts are detrimental. I mean, depression, people experience depression, anxiety, so sleep difficulties. So it does impact the physical body. So with racism and discrimination, those things are, I would say, they're more easily defined. It's like you can feel it, but with microaggressions, there's kind of like that gray area, and you're not really sure. It's in the air, but you feel something physically, but sometimes it's not easy to pinpoint. You may bring an issue to your manager and it's just like, oh, well, that person didn't mean it. So, because it doesn't have that definity of, that's why we refer to it as, or it is referred to as microaggression. So I hope that answered the person's question.
All right. Thank you for that, Tania. So next question, will the PowerPoint be available to us after?
I can make the PowerPoint available. Actually, you know what? Let me leave that with me, and then I'll let you know, Brian.
Sounds good.
Okay.
We have another question. When did the Black community and all our diversity agree to this type of labeling and terminology?
What was the question?
When did the Black community and all our diversity agree to this type of labeling and terminology?
I'm a bit confused about the question. What type of labeling?
Maybe
if it can't be defined further, I can provide my contact after at the end, and then anyone can reach out to me directly. I hope that this is not coming across as labeling anyone. So this is not, microaggressions don't only impact Black people, but because this is Black Mental Health Week, I really wanted to focus specifically on the experiences that we have as a people.
Sounds good.
Okay, so what I will do is I will go into, there are sub definitions of microaggressions, and then I will pause again. And if there are more questions, then I'll be more than happy to answer those. So we can move on. Okay, so if we can go to the next slide. So different types of microaggressions. There are 3 types of types. The first one is microassaults. So this would be overt discrimination or criticism that is done to discredit a marginalized group. So this would include put downs, bullying, belittling behavior. Examples would be you're Black, so therefore you're incompetent. So this is an example of a micro assault. So this is this is quite aggressive. So I'll give another example of something that is quite aggressive. So let's just say you're in the workplace, or someone is in the workplace. They are in the lunchroom, a racialized person is in the lunchroom, they're eating lunch, and one of their colleagues walks in and says, it smells in here. And then they turn to that person who's eating and say, is that curry? So that would be an example of a micro insult. Touching one of your colleagues' hair without permission, or asking to touch their hair. That's another example of a micro assault. And I can't see anyone but Brian, and I've experienced that before. And if you've experienced this is a direct example of a micro assault. Okay, so next slide, please. We've got micro insults. So these would be comments that communicate that the demographic group, and I'm going to read this slow. Actually, let me start all over. I'm going to read this slow because there's a lot of words in here. So micro insults are comments that communicate that the demographic group is not respected, but the person who's being targeted is seen as an exception to that stereotype. So I'll insert there, I don't see you as Black. It is often seen as a compliment in the eyes of the person who said the insult, but a direct insult to the person who receives it. The one who is delivering their microassault may not realize that they have insulted the target because of their own unconscious bias or prejudice. So microinsults are verbal and nonverbal communication. That word again, subtly conveys rudeness, insensitivity, and demeans a person's racial heritage or identity. So examples would be, you're told that you articulate yourself well. Your English is very good, so it's conveying surprise. You're pretty for a Black girl. So commenting, just these are types of subtle comments. So let's just say that happened to me and I went to leadership and I said, somebody said that, my English is well, and it may just be like, I don't really, that's a compliment. I don't see that there's anything wrong with that. So if you're not versed in understanding what a microaggression is, it may be something that's pushed to the side. So I wanted to provide that example as well. We've got one more sub definition of micro insult, and we can move over to the next page. One more micro insult, which may also resonate with some people, is not pronouncing a person's name correctly or shortening someone's name for ease. So those would be other examples. So microinvalidation. So this is the third and last subcategory of microaggression. And this is a comment or action that dismisses the experience of a historically disadvantaged group of people. It's a form of communication that subtly excludes, negates, or nullifies the thoughts, feelings, or experiential reality of a person of color. So an example would be a white person telling a Black person that racism doesn't exist anymore. So another example would be, and I've experienced this as well, comparing skin tone. So I've had a white colleague say to me, you know, I get darker than you in the summer. So this is invalidating the Black experience. So getting darker doesn't mean we're the same, even though that comment may be to say that, you know, I want to compliment you, there's some familiarity between us, but there isn't that familiarity as a result of saying this. It's just not appropriate. So the other thing too is inappropriately telling people that you have a Black friend. So this is another example of a microinvalidation as well. Okay, so hopefully with me providing these definitions, it's a little bit more clear because I've gone a little bit deeper into the types of microaggressions that we can and do, and I'm sure have experienced. Next slide, please. So microaggressions and Black women in the workplace. Okay, so all women can likely say that they've experienced microaggressions in the workplace, but Black women are one of the groups of people, if not, I would say one of the most targeted when it comes to microaggressions in the workplace. So the standards of performance and doing well is different. It's much higher for us. And microaggressions, very unsafe for many of us if we're experiencing it. So one positive thing, and there are many positive things that have happened with COVID, but one positive thing is when organizations went virtual or went remote, there actually is a growing body of research that has showed that Black women have been happy to be working from home. There is more psychological safety. They don't have to necessarily worry about, their hair, the clothes that they're going to wear, turning on their camera, and there is more flexibility. And this is not a blanket statement. I'm just saying that this is the research that's been out there, and there has been more comfort in being at home. With that said, microaggressions still do happen within the virtual world because some organizations may say you have to keep your camera on, and those comments still can be made virtually and in team meetings. So I just wanted to show the two sides that working virtually has had its benefits, and then there are still issues that do occur. So we can advance the slide, and it's time for a video. So rather than me continue on about the experience of Black women in the workplace, I think that this short clip, so it's, I'm only showing less than 3 minutes of the video. And keep in mind too, when you're watching this video, I think about misogynoir, so loosely define the hatred of towards Black women. So if you can play that video, and then we'll go on from there. If there are any questions, I'll take a pause at this time.
The most disrespected person in America is the Black woman. The most unprotected person in America is the Black woman. The most neglected person in America is the Black woman.
They were just like, let's put the big Black girl out there. If I were a different race and a different gender, would you be treating me the same way?
Immediately, they want to disrespect you.
Something that I'm interrogating in myself, but I'm like highly sensitive to, especially in like a work environment, about how I present. And I only present certain things about myself with certain people.
People want me to have this singular experience around this part of who I am, as opposed to seeing me as a full human being.
There were moments where people were not taking me seriously or thinking that I was subpar solely because of my race and my gender.
Where the assumption is always going to lead in that I know less than the rest of you because I'm not like a skinny white boy.
Coming into the workforce, I think I pose a threat as far as my knowledge. I was too young to be too smart, too precocious, just too much of everything too soon.
A lot of times that looks like tokenism. So it's, we're going to tell you that we want your brilliance, but we really just want the people to know that we have a Black trans woman working here. So in that way, it's kind of like being uplifted, but also kind of put in a box where you're not allowed to be anything but that thing.
Being Black woman and young in the work environment is very, very challenging because immediately they want to disrespect you. For some weird reason, older white people want to just automatically just be like, whatever you're saying is just stupidity and I want to disrespect you however I can.
One of the last jobs I had, I found that there was this coworker who, whenever I would say something, would immediately counter what I was saying. And question what I was saying in a way that didn't make sense because I'd actually been there a little longer than her and I was like, I don't understand. So I talked to another Black coworker because I was like, I don't know if I'm being sensitive about this. Maybe I'm reading into things. Can you I don't know, but this seems very weird. And then he ended up having a situation with her where there were other coworkers, most of them were white. She was then asking all of them what universities they went to. And they all answered, and she skipped him. And then he asked her, why didn't you ask me? And she said, oh, I just assumed you didn't go to college.
So when I first started working in New York, I knew nobody, and to me.
Okay, so I'll take a moment to pause there. And then we can, if there are any questions, and then I'll put my slides back up. Just a moment here.
All right. So do you want me to read the questions for you?
Just give me one moment. I just want to pull up, it looks like my slide for some reason have disappeared. 1 second. And then we can ask questions. So it looks like like my slides are working again. So Mike, for now, I think I can take over. And are there questions, Brian?
Yes, there are. All right, so one of the questions, what would you say about the microaggression that exists within the Black community? And this is a two-part question. How can we improve on the microaggression amongst ourselves?
So that's a very good question. So yes, there are, so microaggressions happen not just, one race towards another race. There are microaggressions within our own community, and that really is rooted in white supremacy. And, I think it's first of all about having that knowledge, because first, once you have the knowledge, because maybe you don't even realize exactly what it is that you're doing. And so having that knowledge and then educating yourself on how to be different. I think it's really important to get supports from family and friends, attend these types of presentations as a way to really educate yourself and change your perspective. But really, a person is not going to change until they're ready to. But in terms of it happening between our own culture, it does happen for sure. And then calling it out. I know that we talk about the calling out and calling in culture, or however you want to term it, but I see them both as two sides of a coin. As long as you're respectful in doing that, then I think that it's it's important to let a person know that it isn't okay to do that. I mean, sometimes it doesn't even feel safe to do that, but at least if you also have an outlet to dislodge that. What was the second part of the question? You're on mute, Brian.
Thank you. The second part of the question was, how can we improve on the microaggression amongst ourselves?
Okay, so I did answer. Okay.
All right, so there was a comment. Thank you for bringing awareness to this issue. It's so hard to identify on both ends, both the victim and the aggressor. Another question was, could you kindly share the Black male experience for young adults and victims?
So examples would be, so we all experience microaggressions on I'll say a regular basis. I won't say on a daily basis. And if you're experiencing that out, or for me specifically, like if it's being experienced out in the community and it's somebody that you're never going to see again personally, I don't engage with that, because that's that person's issue. When it's in the workplace, as a young Black male or as a male, I will say that there isn't as much research, because I think, and I'm going to put in air quotes, there's a Black man, and that willingness to make certain comments isn't there. So if it is something that is there, then it's really, I think you can still use the same strategies, so the same things are going to happen, those same impacts are going to happen. I will be talking about coping strategies a little bit later, so if you could just hold on a little bit, then that will be that's for everyone. So hold tight. I'll say that for now.
And we do have one question left. And I think this might be referring to a comment that you made in the slideshow presentation, but is it the same? Is it true in reverse regarding the comment, I have a Black friend, and brackets, I have a white friend, if a person of color says it?
It isn't the same, because if we were thinking about racism, that's something that's impacted with marginalized people. So it isn't the same. I mean, and then also I think environment is another factor as well.
Sounds good. Those are all the questions.
Okay, so we're actually at, hopefully I'll be able to answer that question about how Black males can develop strategies, how they can get that support, because the next slide is about coping strategies. And again, I don't know what's happening, but I can't advance the slides again. So if
click on the presentation.
Pardon me?
Maybe click on the slideshow.
Yeah, I did.
Then
I did. I have it on slideshow. So it was working when the video was playing, and then now my computer's stuck again. Mike, can you advance to the next slide? Thank you. All right. So with coping strategies, first and foremost, if you think that you're experiencing microaggressions within the workplace, trust your gut. If you remember when I said a little bit earlier on, for me, it was just, and I don't know, I always do this with my fingers when I'm trying to, when I was thinking of, what is it that I'm experiencing? It's like I can feel something, but I'm not really sure what it is, but it just feels off. So if you're feeling off, trust that. That's the first thing that is really important. We tend to second guess ourselves, or say, maybe I'm overreacting, I'm making a big deal about this. but your gut never lies. Really important to get support. So speaking to family and friends, if you have a tribe of people that love and support you, then you really want to make sure that you connect with them. Some support you may find may be, well, you know what, just quit, or just let it roll off of your shoulders. It's not a big deal. But when you're in that situation, it's not easy to do that. So when you're picking those people that are supporting you, just make sure that you pick those people that are actually going to hold space for you, lift you up. That is really, really important to do. Find your allies. So that, I would say, in the workplace and externally. If you don't have any allies within the workplace, because that is very common, then make sure that you are connecting with people within the community that will support you. I have here develop an infinity group. I don't know if that's necessarily something that's always possible. So I will say develop or join an affinity group, and that can also be referred to as an employee resource group within the workplace. And what that is a group of people that have a shared interest or common goal, and then they talk about the issues, or they talk about that topic. They get support. They can also share resources. So that's something that can be very helpful when you're in the workplace. And you can also develop an affinity group on your own with people that are in your life. In taking action, so prior to even going to speaking to human resources, if you feel safe and comfortable, the first thing that I would encourage someone to do is to speak with their manager. Again, if you feel safe to do that, speak to your manager, speak to leadership, let them know what's going on. And if you're finding that you're not getting the support that you need, you're not being heard, then I would say speak to human resources. Again, if it's safe to do so. I bring up the topic of or the suggestion of leaving your job. I would never say somebody should or should not leave their job. That's something that they have to decide. And if you are going to go that route, it's very important to develop an exit strategy. As I said, take that as, I'm not saying that somebody should or shouldn't leave their job. But at the end of the day, if your overall health is being impacted, I would say that you're number one. Mental health strategies, definitely important to have some sort of an outlet, maybe a hobby, something that you're interested in, ensuring that you're doing that on a regular basis. If your outlet isn't a hobby, it may be just speaking to somebody that is a support, then that is an outlet. Have a therapist. I know that this is not necessarily an option for everyone because therapy is or can be expensive. If you've got benefits, I'd say even as a start, EAP is something that it's something that you can look into, and there are resources online. So getting that therapeutic support is something that is something I would really encourage people to do. Prayer and meditation, if that is something that you find helpful, that's another option. Eating regular meals, not skipping meals, eating as healthy as you possibly can to just ensure that you're keeping your mind functioning well. Exercise. That's a way to keep the mental health well. And if exercise is just walking around the block for 5 minutes, even as a start, once a week, and then increasing to a couple of times a week and to every day, whatever it is that makes sense for you, but really getting outside, getting that vitamin D, getting in that fresh air, that's really, really important. Sleep hygiene is something that is very, very important. And then lastly, if you're really struggling, like if it is, and I will say, if it is a violent, and when I say violent, I don't necessarily mean a physically violent work environment, but if it is a violent work environment where you're impacted and struggling mentally, I would highly encourage people to speak to their family physician. You know, you definitely want to make sure that at least there's also something documented in terms of being on record. One part that I actually did miss is documentation under take it action. Document, you know, the interactions that you have. Because if you're within a workspace and you've been there for an extended period of time, you may not necessarily remember everything. So it's really important to document, because it could be also something that you may need to show at some point. So really important to do. So these coping strategies or examples are universal to anyone, not just Black women, Black men, or Indigenous individuals, or anyone of a different race. It's anybody can use these coping strategies. Okay, so if we can advance the slide, and now I'm going to do a long reading with this case discussion. Let me just look at the time. So we may have time for two case discussions, we'll see, but I do want to leave enough time for questions. So I'll read the first case discussion, and then what I'm going to ask people to do is answer some questions. So I'll read this first case discussion, and then I'll ask you the question, and then we can go from there. Just wondering, Brian, is it possible to unmute people? Or the person who will be answering, or does it have to be typed in the chat?
Because of the type of session we're in, it would have to be typed in the chat. So they could answer the question by just placing their answer in the Q&A box.
Okay. So of course I've forgotten my glasses, so I'm gonna just read as best as I can. If I fumble, please bear with me. I can read, I promise, but we'll get into the first case discussion. All right, so Jeremiah is a young Black social worker working at a treatment center. He recently started group co-facilitation with a senior counselor, Michael, who is a white man. Jeremiah is very excited about being in this role because group facilitation is something he enjoyed observing during his student placement while in university. During one of the group sessions, a client of a racialized background spoke about the challenges of being stopped by police. Other group members, most of whom identified as Black, shared similar experiences. This topic generated a meaningful discussion. Michael asked Jeremiah if he ever had this experience. Shocked by the question, Jeremiah immediately said no. He thought it was inappropriate to bring this experience into the group and was quiet for the remainder of the group session. Jeremiah and Michael later debriefed about the group. Michael provided Jeremiah with positive feedback and asked if he had any questions. Jeremiah reluctantly explained that he felt uncomfortable with Michael's question regarding his experience with the police. Michael was interested in the topic of discussion and that he intended to engage Jeremiah in the group conversation. Lastly, Michael told Jeremiah he was being insensitive. It should say insensitive. Sorry, he was being sensitive. My apologies. Jeremiah later shared this experience with his manager. Jeremiah did a great job co-facilitating the group session and that he did not believe Michael meant any harm. He encouraged Jeremiah to meet with Michael to discuss co-facilitation styles. So the questions that I have are, what microaggressions did you identify, if any? Were there any identifiable concerns? And I'll leave it at those two. So I'll just put it at those two questions. So what microaggressions Could you identify if there were any, and were there any identifiable concerns?
I will be keeping an eye on the Q&A box. So one person had mentioned intent versus impact.
Yeah. Is it so definitely, can that person elaborate further? So even though there is, and I'll just say, even though there is the intent, there may be no intent. Impact is had, can be had.
So I'm believing it's the same person mentioned, did not believe Michael meant any harm. Harm happened even if the intent was not harmful.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so he didn't mean any harm, but there was harm, and the dismissal of that, of Jeremiah being insensitive.
Yes. Another person mentioned micro-invalidation. Another person also mentioned micro-invalidation, dismissing Jeremiah's experience and just moving on.
Yeah, so both the manager and Michael not really listening to what Jeremiah had said and his concerns.
Yes. Another individual had mentioned double microaggression from Michael and from the manager. And then another individual said the assumption that Michael may have had a similar experience because he was Black was insensitive.
Mhm. So yes, so all of those responses, excellent. Something else that I would also mention is asking that inappropriate in group. So there is that, it's kind of like that power, and there shouldn't be a power imbalance because both of them are facilitators. So asking that type of question as if Jeremiah is a group member, trying to bring him into that group discussion isn't appropriate. Anything else, Brian?
So some other people have commented assumption of the Black man experience by the police. Michael effectively downgraded Jeremiah to the rank of the patient by associating them on the basis of the minority group.
Mhm.
Now, this has been done publicly and therefore invalidated his authority.
Yeah, absolutely.
Um, Someone had commented, Jeremiah is a service provider, not a patient. Another person had wrote, Michael inadvertently othered Jeremiah. And there was a question slash comment, would Michael ask a female social worker if she had an eating disorder if they were in an eating disorder focus group?
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, right there, that hits the nail on the head, right? Because it's like so that likely wouldn't happen. Not saying it's impossible, likely wouldn't happen. So I do appreciate all this feedback. Two other things that I would mention is Michael speaking with the supervisor ahead of time, providing positive feedback and explaining what happened in the group. So that's some, and then once Jeremiah had gone to the manager, it was, well, Michael already came to me and told me you did a good job, and and then I don't think that he meant anything by it. The other thing is the supervisor then sending sending Jeremiah back to Michael to discuss co-facilitation style. So again, so it's kind of like you're now putting somebody back into that harm as opposed to addressing it. All right, so I think we can do the second case discussion, and then I'll open it up broadly for questions. All right. Got to put on my spidey eyes for this again. Okay, so during a virtual clinical staff meeting, case managers were asked to provide updates of their client cases. In the meeting, attendees would receive feedback about areas that are working well and gaps in service that are to be addressed. This process is used to ensure that all clinical staff are providing exceptional service to their clients. Antoinette, a Black woman of Caribbean descent, presented her client cases. Her colleague, Jennifer, who is a peer, provided feedback, a usual practice in these meetings. Jennifer said she had a chance to review some of Antoinette's cases and noticed areas needing improvement. She highlighted some positive points, however, she focused more heavily on aspects of cases that she felt required follow-up. Jennifer's approach was direct, and her comments regarding gaps pointed to deficiencies in Antoinette's approach to working with her clients. Jennifer asked Antoinette to explain her reasoning for not following through on areas she felt were missed. She also suggested that she go back and correct her mistakes. Lastly, Jennifer offered to assist Antoinette around being more efficient and expressed her openness to help if needed. After a few moments of silence, the manager said that in the interest of time, they needed to move on to the next meeting agenda item. Later in the day, two of Antoinette's colleagues who were in attendance in the meeting texted her to ask if she was okay. So I'll ask the same questions again. What microaggressions, if any, can you identify, and were there any other identifiable concerns?
Right, so we have one comment of micro assaults.
Yes. Micro assaults. Can we broaden that a little bit more? And yes, that is definitely a micro assault.
So do you want people to provide the type of
No. Just, I mean, you can, if that person wants to, they can, what specifically are they referring to?
All right, someone else had commented, it seems like the breadth and depth of Jennifer's feedback is out of line with the organization's standards.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, are there more?
Not at this moment.
Okay.
This came in. Disappointing that the manager did not take opportunity to intervene in Jennifer's actions to belittle Antoinette.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so yes, absolutely. There are a few more. There's one more slide that I will go to. Before that, if we can go back. So I've got one more slide and then we'll open up to questions, but I just want to, so I'll highlight a couple of points that I've written down. So somebody had already mentioned this. Jennifer's feedback was heavily focused on the negative. She had spoken with Antoinette as if she was her subordinate. There was some gaslighting in there to go back and correct her mistakes. No one was speaking up in the meeting. So this is also a form of microaggression, and that would be, so that would be micro insult. Uh, and then someone had already said the manager moving to the next topic, essentially silencing Antoinette. And then another micro insult would be texting Antoinette after asking her if she was okay rather than speaking up in the moment. So we'll move on to the last slide and I'll go quickly with this one and then I'll open it up for any questions. Okay, so what organizations can do to address microaggressions? First and foremost, really to be active in creating a safe and inclusive work environment where people of diverse backgrounds feel welcomed and have a sense of belonging. And this can be partially, and I say partially because there are a number of other things that can be done. That would be to have policies and procedures that are inclusive and that that there are some sort of accountability for when when there's repeated microaggressions experienced by a person. I think it's really important to have training. So have training about this, have regular ongoing training about inclusivity. The other thing is, I think it's really important, just like how you would have in organizations, cybersecurity training, and then you've got to do a refresher annually. Or if you're in a certain work environment where there's codes training, and then you have to have that annually. So implement ongoing annual training about microaggressions within the workplace. As I said, the accountability piece, really just rather than, not addressing it, but that there is some sort of consequences, something does happen, there is a discussion. So not referring somebody back to a person that has created harm on another person. You want to also, I think it's important to implement equitable hiring practices. So again, I just want to state that, because this is Black Mental Health Week, this is why I'm focused on Black people. So you want to hire Black people, you want to pay them the same that you would pay your white counterparts. You want to also have them on hiring committees, have them in leadership, executive positions, have them on boards, pay women employees of color the same that you would white employees. So these are just a few examples, and there are many other things that can be done, but I just thought that it would be really important to highlight some of the things that organizations can do and really have the conversation. I've said this quickly, but I really want to come back to it, rather than saying, okay, this is a situation that's happened, like the case studies that I spoke about, but really taking a look at, what is it that's happening, and then addressing it. That training will be helpful for you to be able to catch that. And if you don't, it's at least being able to say, you know what, I don't understand what's happening and I'm still learning, but listening to your colleagues, listening to your staff, and hearing what they're saying, because many people, I'll say many of us, are suffering in silence. And when you want an employee to come to work and put their best foot forward, they want to know that they're coming to a safe environment so that they can provide you with the best optimal performance as an employee. So with that said, I will stop there and open it up for questions. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay, so we're about to go to Q&A session, correct?
Yes, we are in Q&A.
So before we continue, Mike, would you be able to drop the survey into the chat so recipients are able to complete while they are a part of the Q&A session? All right, so we good to go with questions, Tanya?
Yes.
All right. So the first question that we have, I started a new job recently and experienced microaggressions in my first 2 weeks. Although these situations have been addressed and the individuals I'm referring to say they're committed to doing better, I am still triggered in my interactions with them. I feel unsafe and isolated. Would you please share some strategies that can be taken to restore trust and safety? Thank you.
So I wonder, well, first and foremost, I think that it's really important to have that outlet outside of work, because it's really important to be able to communicate what's going on. If there are any allies in the workplace, trusted allies, then I would say that that would be a place to go as well. Because, and the reason why I say that is because those people would know the nature of the work, and then they could help with providing some strategies to cope. I know that when I was experiencing microaggressions, I had a very, very small group of trusted individuals that I could speak to, and they would speak to me as well. And I found that that was very helpful. But I think it also is about, if you feel comfortable speaking up and saying what's going on to management, just ensure that you continue to do that. One of the things that I had mentioned, and I hope I didn't gloss over it, but don't think of it as I'm being overly sensitive and I'm not going to say anything. I think that the more that you're communicating what's going on, that it's a problem, then I'm hoping that my hope would be that there would be some sort of action that is taken place. Documentation is very, very important, because it may be something that you might need later on, moving forward. HR would be another place to go. I mean, ultimately, HR is for the company, but at the same time, there needs to be something on record if you feel like this is something that you're experiencing over and over again. You had mentioned that that the people have been spoken to and you still don't feel safe. You have just recently started this job, so it may take some time for you to build trust, because when trust is broken, it does take some time to build back up that trust. So those are a few things that I would definitely start off with off the bat.
Thank you for that. The next question, if a more marginalized employee makes a mistake at work, what is the best way to address the mistake in an equitable way, like with Jennifer and Antoinette?
It could be about, I would say, not have that on display in a team meeting first and foremost. If you're truly wanting to help and support somebody, it may be. It's also about your approach, right? So if it's, I mean, I, like anybody else, have never been hasn't been perfect in my workplace. I've made a mistake before, and approach is key. And I've appreciated if I didn't, especially as a new employee, if I missed something, that someone pulled me aside and said, this is how we normally do things, or have you considered X? But I really think that approach is key. You definitely don't want to make a person feel like they're less than, or they're that they're not up to par. Um, I like to believe that all of us are doing the best that we can. So with that said, like, I just really think that just think of the person as doing the best that they can, and maybe they really don't know.
Great, thank you for that answer and for that question. So next question is, can you share what are micro affirmations and show some examples of micro affirmations to counteract some of your examples of microaggressions?
So there's actually a it's a toolkit. It's called Micro Affirmations, and it's designed specifically for people who are experience microaggressions, for parents and supporters of people that are experiencing microaggressions. And that's something that can be found online. I think it's also something that you can purchase. The other thing that I want to add first is there's also something called the Micropedia. If you Google Micropedia, it will take you to a website where you can put in experiences of what an experience that you're having, and it'll tell you the type of microaggression and how to respond to that. But I think for and I don't know that I would necessarily say I can give you a micro affirmation, because it could be there. I don't think there's a blanket micro affirmation for every single microaggression. But what I would ask if you are experiencing a microaggression is ask, what do you mean by that? Be curious. Use your question as a place of curiosity, not a place of try not to come from a place of being defensive, but approach it with curiosity. Because sometimes when you're asking, what do you mean by that? It helps a person to take a step back and really have to explain what it is that they mean, and then also, and sharing that, I don't feel comfortable with you saying whatever it is that you said, but it's easier said than done to say that I don't feel comfortable, but I would approach it as, what do you mean by that? So I can't give I can't give one general micro affirmation. It depends on the situation.
Before we go to the next question, just an update from the survey. If you're able to look into the section where it says Q&A, you should see tab saying open, answer, dismiss. The survey is underneath the answer tab. So it is under Mike Van Veen's name, and you should see Deborah Williams Drives Toronto, and you see the survey there.
So I do want to say, is that those are the questions, Brian? It's 1:30. I know that I want to respect everyone's time.
There is one question, but we could probably answer that and then just end the session if that's okay.
Okay.
All right, so the last question is, how do you recommend that we advocate for staff and organizational accountability when management hides behind issues of HR confidentiality?
Can you read that question again?
How do you recommend that we advocate for staff and organizational accountability when management hides behind issues of HR confidentiality?
So one of the things that I would start with is, if it's possible, to have an affinity group. So an affinity group could be organization-wide, or something that you develop on your own. And I think that would be a place where it's a meeting of the minds, and you can get together and talk about the issues, the culture of the workplace, and then also develop strategies together as to how you can bring that the concerns forward to management. That would be the first place that I would start. I do want to say thank you everyone who joined today. I really do appreciate you listening to me talking about microaggressions in the workplace. And I do want to say thank you to Taibu for welcoming me here today. And I do want to just have one shout out to my brother who lives in Ghana, who is on today. So and everybody that came out. So thank you.
So thank you so much, Tania, for joining us today. Thank you everyone for participating in this workshop, and we look forward to seeing you at other events throughout the Black Mental Health Week. Thank you, Tania.
Thank you.